G'day guys, welcome to episode 87 of Ask Jack D. Thank you for tuning in once again. Today I take a question about my next book, which is out in April 2016. My God, it's 2016 already. And I talk about the protest in which this book arose, what it's about, and why it will help you become the best version of yourself so that you can leave a legacy that is ultimately meaningful to you.
28 and I'm trying to shape history, pulling from the sky for some strength to take with me. Line up the stars, fly away quickly and push the world forward like a tidal wave hit me. I ride the wave swiftly, I fear no man.
G'day guys, welcome to episode 87 of Ask Jack D. Today we take a question from Instagram from Chantel Walsh, who asks, Jack, I am enjoying hearing whispers of your next book. Thank you, Chantel. What is it about? Good question. Hashtag Ask Jack D. Okay, Chantel, what is my next book about? So I'm still writing it, right? So let me give you the very unpolished, unstructured version. Fundamentally, it is a book about becoming your best self so that you can contribute the most during your time here on planet Earth and leave a legacy that is meaningful to you. Legacy being whatever is important to you, whether it's a Nelson Mandela kind of a legacy, I helped lead a freedom movement, or whether it's I raised a family and created a beautiful veggie patch, right? Both are equally as honorable, and there's no judgment around scale. It's just about how do you define your truth, how do you define your purpose, and live in alignment to it. The book came because, the idea for the book came about when I was in Rome, right? Sistine Chapel, Rome. I've spoken about this a couple of times recently, but although I did say the Sistine Chapel was in Paris when it's actually in Rome. And I was learning about Michelangelo, right? So I spent a lot of my time studying and researching the greats of history, the people that have changed the course of history forever. Whether it's Michelangelo, who was a sculptor turned painter 500 years ago, who painted the roof of the Sistine Chapel. Whether it's Albert Einstein, who rewrote physics and like science and how we see the universe about 100 years ago. Whether it's Mandela, who obviously led the anti-apartheid movement more recently. Steve Jobs, who made technology more intuitive. Branson, who will leave a substantial legacy on planet Earth. Oprah, who, spends her life, came from absolutely nothing, like African-American woman born in the States in the 50s, comes from nothing to be the most successful television host, and to a point where, in her words now, she's able to disseminate pieces of light into lounge rooms throughout the world, right? And I look at these people and I ask the question, how do they set themselves up in terms of how do they build themselves internally? And how did they set up their world? So how do they set themselves up in such a way to enable them to get so much out of themselves? And how did they set up their world and become the leaders where they're able to touch the hearts and minds of so many other people and lead them toward one common objective or one common vision? And the more I studied these stories, the more I realized how untold and unwritten they still are. Like a lot of you would probably know the name Michelangelo, probably from the Ninja Turtles, right? But what we don't understand is all the study he did as a young boy and his rebellious nature and his independent thinking and the protest he had against the Catholic Church at the time and the hidden symbolism he put in the roof of the Sistine Chapel as a protest against the Catholic Church that, had it have been seen at the time, would have been seen to be executed in Rome, right? We don't. So he was willing to risk his life to portray his beliefs. He was willing to risk his life to leave some symbolism that he knew one day would be seen in protest and in disruption to the Catholic Church. No different to most entrepreneurs today, right? If you study Mandela, the fact that he wasn't a political person or a revolutionary person, and that he had to learn how, and initially when he was in political circles, he felt unworthy of being there and felt like his ideas weren't formed and felt like he couldn't articulate himself. And so, one day when he was found not guilty in his first court case, he was obviously found guilty later. He spent 27 years in prison. But the first time when he was found not guilty, he walks out and he goes, in that moment, I realized when I was walking out of court, I had three things to do. I had to disappear, he's going underground. I had to build an army and I had to start a revolution. And I knew how to do none of those things. That would have been a tall order for an army general of 30 years. He'd never been in the army, never been a fighter, never been a revolutionary. Although he had sort of on a minor scale, but he'd never been on a large scale. And he said, and I knew nothing about how to do any of that. So I started to tick off those three things on my to-do list the only way I knew how, by reading books and to speaking to people I know. No different to entrepreneurs and change makers today. Same with Branson, right? Branson said, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just realized I needed to be in order to keep my magazine going. This is a student magazine back when he was 16. So there's patterns, right, between all of these different, same with Oprah's jobs, doesn't matter. Martin Luther King, there's patterns. The patterns are independent thinker, forms of protest against the existing institutions or the cultural paradigms of their time, right? Change makers often have an adversarial relationship with the values inherent in the societies in which they live. They start a protest around that. They try and join the existing institution. Monet, who started Impressionism, is another good example. All these stories are in the book, by the way. Tried to get listed in the Salon, which was the biggest art gallery. Einstein tried to get a job in academia. Mandela tried to join the existing parties. They were rejected to the point where they had to go and do their own thing, right? So know who they are, high degree of protest, outcast and misfit from traditional institutions, build it on their own, often protested and not revered in their time, not always, but often. Do something great and often are revered later on, at a later time in history. Like for instance, Jobs probably didn't feel very loved when he was alive. But if he was around to see how revered he is today, he probably would feel very loved. So it's not a collection of other people's stories, but it is about looking at the people that have left a legacy that was important to them and going, how did they do that? And how do we still do it today? Because I believe the same is true for both instances, right? And I believe, I was speaking to at a mothers conference, a mothers in business conference last week, and I was saying there is no difference in courage that it takes to free a country, in Mandela's case, or raise a child. Right? There's no difference. It's the same stuff. It's just about going, what is true for me? What is my purpose? What is my path? What do I think I'm here to do? And then realizing that, being unapologetic around that, fucking off the OPRs, which are other people's rules, living according to your own rule book, and trying to live a life fulfilled so that you can act as an example for everybody else. It's ultimately a book about becoming your best self so that you can contribute the most to the people around you, to your community, to your country, to the world at large. So it's really a book about legacy, but not about looking outwardly, although a lot of that too. It's about how do you become your best self in order to change the world. Because the future doesn't need to look like the past, right? We often have a belief that the future is going to resemble the past, and that's not true. It is true because we believe it's true, meaning our believing the future is going to resemble the past makes it so. All it takes is one person to come along and go, the future doesn't need to really look that way. It doesn't need to look like the way we did it yesterday. We can reimagine tomorrow and reinvent the future, right? And I believe any human being can do that. You don't need to, Einstein made out, they're all human. They're all very, very human. They're flawed, they're vulnerable, they had their own insecurities. They had, their own holes in their own personal lives and professional lives. So it's about having that vision for your own life for the sake of contributing to the vision for the planet, right? The book is called Unwritten because it's about telling stories that I believe are unwritten and discussing principles that I believe haven't been exposed to the degree that they perhaps should have been. And the tagline is reinvent tomorrow.
I've been there, I've just actualized a wish that I dreamed as a kid. 'Cause I'm lining up